So I have about an hour to work and back, so I'm going to be making some Yu-Gi-Oh videos, just saying whatever's in my mind as an above average Yu-Gi-Oh player. So in Pac's new video, he was talking about what you need to do to win events or to top an event. He was saying deck building and then like the way that you play the game, interactions and stuff like that. I think it was a good video. I'm not gonna lie, like I enjoyed watching the video. But there's certain things that I feel like a lot of pro players, they won't tell you and they feel like they shouldn't tell you. To be honest, there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scene and they know this. Not almost, every single pro player knows this. People that consistently win events, there's a reason why they consistently win events. I'm not saying it in a bad way, but there's certain things that non-pro players do that average players, below average players, and above average players don't do. So, Pac mentions that you need to play a lot on DB, like to practice and like get better at the game. But I feel like practicing on DB only gets you to a certain point. You only learn, I think, in my opinion, 1/5 of the game. Sure, you could learn certain interactions with your own deck, or like test certain ratios, through repetition. You kind of like understand the variance of your deck. So that's a good thing. But you're taking away a really big part of the game when you're only playing on DB and you're not playing IRL Yu-Gi. Pac and a lot of other pro players, they play a lot of events. So like they travel globally. They'll travel hours. They'll take planes. Like when people do this for full time, or even like if they have the ability to do it, which these pro players do, they travel to a lot of events. And if you see on paper the events that they attend and the events that they top or the events that they win, you'll be shocked. People just don't see these things because they go on YouTube and they say, oh, first place deck profile on like whatever, regional or top 4 regional. But these people had to play a lot of events to top 4 regional, or like to do that, as opposed to like other players that they could only afford to go to one regional every 3-4 months. It's very hard. But the fact that they're attending so many events, they kind of let variance work in their favor. So if you attend one event every 3 months, you might have the best deck in the room. Like there's probably a high possibility that you have the best deck list in the room, which is very important. Deck lists are very important. You probably do have the best deck in the room, but due to variance, you might not get top, or you might not win the event. You could play perfectly, but just due to variance, the cards that you draw, the cards that your opponent draws, you don't do well. So when you attend more events, you kind of skew variance into your favor in a way, because your deck list is the same, your deck list is still really, really good, or the best, quote unquote, and you'll draw better hands, or you'll play more games. So that's a really big thing that I just want people to know, that like, although they post top 4, whatever, first place, whatever, they had to play a shit ton of events to do that. Now, another thing that I really want to talk about, and I feel like is really, really important, a lot of people don't talk about it, is playing IRL Yu-Gi-Oh! And we are not robots. We are not robots. We misplay. Our opponent misplays. There are things that our opponent does that causes us to misplay. There are things that they don't do that causes us to misplay. There's so many variables when playing a single game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Like if your opponent has 2 set cards and you have an MST, should you blind MST? Maybe the correct thing to do is to blind MST. Like you don't know what the correct option is. Now there's certain things you could do, and Patrick Hoban talks about this in Road to the King, that you could say to like get a hint off of your opponent, so the right one to MST, or maybe you should hold your MST, or, you know, certain things like that, which I think is very important. Because moves like that, a simple misplay from your opponent could be in the lead, they could have the winning play, and then a simple misstep causes them to lose. And to be honest, how many times has that happened to me? How many times has that happened to you? I feel like it's happened to everyone multiple times, where you're like, shit, all right, I lose this game, but you just like, all right, I'm just gonna let him attack me for game, and then they mess up, or like they purposely play into your Nibiru, or like they, you know, they mess up their combo, etc. It's part of the game, and I feel like maybe on Dueling Book, you know, you can kind of practice that. That's a good place to practice it, but playing like casually with your friends and like taking back plays all the time, you're not gonna learn, in my opinion, and you're gonna keep fucking up when it matters. So that's another thing. So that's another layer, I would say. Now, furthermore, it kind of falls into sharking and cheating, but I've played against pro players many times, and I've watched them play like between every round. Whenever I'm done with my game, right away I jolt to the front of the tables and I watch my favorite players, or very well-known players. I watch them play because I know that they do something that not everyone else does. There's a reason why they win all the time, or they do well all the time. There's a reason why they can't. There's no way there isn't a reason for this. So I always watch pro players. I watch them on DB, and I've also played against them many times. And I realized that they don't shark, but it's because it's part of the rules. Like, let's say you activate Dark Hole, you can't be like, oh, oops, like, let me take that back, right? Or pretend like you normal summon Tour Guide, and then you activate Dark Hole, and then you're like, oh, I'm gonna get the effect off of Tour Guide. We're like, and then they're gonna be like, nope, you forgot, which is true. Like, they're right, 110%. They're right. You didn't activate Tour Guide, but I feel like that happens way more often than people think. Or like, maybe that wasn't a good example, but things along that nature. Another thing is pro players, when they sit against average players, which, mind you, in a tournament, when you enter an event, I would say the first 6 rounds, you're playing average to below average to maybe 1 or 2 above average players. When you play these games, these people, they know the pro player. They see them on YouTube, so they get a little nervous. They get a little fidgety. They get intimidated, quote unquote. So that causes them to misplay even more so than normal, because they're like super nice. They're super, you know, like, they want to agree with everything that the pro player says. So that also works into their favor. That it does not work into the favor of the average to above average player. Now, another thing that pro players do is they only speak when they have to speak. They never talk while they're playing and give free information. And that's something that the above average and below player does. A little turn over here. No big deal. So these players, they don't speak. There's no reason to speak. It's kind of like putting a poker face, right? Which is a really good thing, because the more you talk, the more information you give. Whether you think you are or not, the above average player, it's a pro player, they're gonna understand. They're gonna read you like a book. Like, they're trained to do this. It's a really big part of the game. Another, I would say, secret that pro players do is, oh, look at this, the sun. Another thing that I played soccer yesterday, I'm wrecked. Another thing that pro players do is, when they are in a losing position, they talk a lot. So they do the flip, they do the opposite. So like, pretend they made their board and they have a bunch of their negates or whatever, they won't speak. They'll barely speak, very minimal responses. But when they're behind, or they know that there's a possibility that they could lose, they do the opposite. So then they start talking a lot. So maybe they'll ask questions that they know the answer to. Like their opponent uses a Shadol effect, and then they'll be like, oh, that's the one that does this, right? Or like they'll ask questions just to get you to think more, to be more in your head and not be on autopilot to do the combo. So this way you'll mess up more. You'll mess up your combo more, and they'll talk to you. They keep talking. They'll ask questions that they know the answer to, or like they'll crack a joke even. And like, this is good. I mean, it's part of the game. You could talk. It's not like you can't talk, but it's like an actual strategy that's used when playing the game. I've dealt with this many times against many pro players, and it's actually my favorite part of the game. Because I realize it too. Like I know when they feel like they're behind, and then they just start talking to me, and they start being sarcastic, like cracking sarcastic jokes, or like saying like, oh wow, like, yo, you're gonna win, you're so good, like, or saying stuff like that purposely to get me to lower my guard, which is what happens. You lower your guard, and then you could lose to, let's say their only play is an imperm, I'll lose to that imperm. Because I'll do the wrong play and I'll play into the imperm. I have a lot more to say. I feel like I'm speaking for the above average player. I personally, like, I attend, I would say, a few regional events or more, like higher events in the year. I'll attend, like, let's say, I don't know, 10 regionals, which is not that many. Maybe a single YCS, and like I've been to one NAT so far. But I go to locals pretty regularly. I go to Gamers Choice in New York, and it's a pretty competitive locals, to be honest. Like it's not like you walk in and you get the buy, so that's good. But I don't really count locals as anything, or regionals pretty much. But I have a bunch of regional tops, a win, and top YCS and stuff. But I choose to play Rogue. I don't choose to play Meta, but anyway, that's besides the case. Yeah, these are just a few things. I have a lot more to say about these topics. If you guys like videos like this, if you want me to make them shorter, talk less, whatever, let me know. But I feel like these videos, this is something that I wish I watched 4 years ago before I started playing competitively. 3 years ago before I started playing competitively. Like, I feel like no one's gonna tell you these things, mainly because they're scared, mainly because they don't want you to know these things, and it's for sure true, guaranteed. All right.